Reverend Mack, you can start the meeting.
Okay, I will now officially call the Board of Trustees meeting, April 27, 2020 to order at this time. Before we go into the adoption of the agenda, I just ask that you just pause with me for a moment. And please join me in remembering two Charleston County School District students who have passed away. Jackson Long attended James Island High School, and Linnell Reed, who attended Daniel Jenkins Academy. We also want to remember St. John's High history teacher, Isaac Legree, who passed away Friday, April 24th. Mr. Legree was a father figure to many students at St. John's High, and he will be sorely missed. Lastly, we also want to keep A.C. Cochran Principal Panetta Wright in our thoughts after the recent loss of her mother. If you would please join me in praying. Father of all, we pray to you for our children and for all those who we love but see no longer. Father, we ask that you grant them eternal rest. Let your light shine upon them. May their soul and the souls of all who have departed from us through the mercy of God rest in peace. And Lord, not for a long prayer, but Lord, for all who have contracted coronavirus, we pray for care and healing. For those who are particularly vulnerable, we pray for safety and protection. For all who experience fear or anxiety, we pray for peace of mind and spirit. For affected families who are facing difficult decisions between food on the table or public safety, we pray for policies that recognize their plight. For those who do not have adequate health insurance, we pray that no family will face financial burdens alone. For public officials and decision makers, we pray for wisdom and we pray for guidance. Father, during this time, may your church be a sign of hope, comfort, and love to all. Grant peace, grant comfort, grant healing. Be with us, Heavenly Father. We pray these unto you in Jesus' name, for Christ's sake. Amen.
Amen.
And at this time now, entertain
I move to approve the agenda as written.
Second.
been properly moved and second. Ms. Coates, how do you vote?
She just had to leave the meeting to go pick Randy up, so.
Okay. Reverend Collins? Mr. Frazier?
Aye.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Mr. Garrett?
Yes.
Ms. Green?
Yep.
Mr. Hollenshed? Mr. Hollenshed?
He's joining later, I think.
Okay. Ms. Jeffries?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Darby?
Yes,
And I vote yes. Okay. At this time now, we'll entertain the approval of the minutes.
Move to approve the minutes as written.
second,
Okay, properly moving second. Reverend Collins, how do you vote? Mr. Frazier, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Garrett?
Yes.
Ms. Green?
Yes.
Ms. Jeffries?
Yes.
Reverend Collins? Ms. Darby?
yes,
And I vote yes, and that motion passes. At this time now, entertain a motion to go into executive session to consider items covered by the attorney-client privilege.
So
so
moved.
moved. Second,
Properly moving second, we'll now go into executive session.
Reverend Mack, I voted yes on both of those items.
Okay, Erica, so and we should have gotten an email about executive session?
Yes, yes, ma'am. Give me 1 second. I'll make sure you receive that.
Did it come from you?
Julie,
Hmm.
just you give me 1 second, I'll send it to you.
Okay, thank you.
Did they send a link for executive session?
Mr. Hollenshed, I'll ask Erica to send you the link directly, okay?
Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Hollenshed, can you hear me? You
Yes, I can hear you.
okay, you should have a prompt on your screen. It doesn't say for you to join executive session. Do you see that anywhere?
No, I see Erica Taylor,
Oh, look,
Cheryl Clemens.
I'm gonna send it to you again, okay? And
Okay.
when it pops up, just you join. It's a button that tells you to join. Give me 1 second, okay?
Okay.
Is all the board members back on?
Reverend Mac, do a roll call, please.
Okay, Ms. Darby, are you on?
Yes,
Mr. Frazier, are you on?
I'm here.
Mr. Garrett, Ms. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Hollenshed,
yes,
Ms. Jeffries,
Yes.
Reverend Collins?
Yes.
Okay, Ms. Coates? All right, we will now reconvene back into open session. I'll entertain a motion for item 4A, contractual matter that was discussed.
I move to extend and amend the current facilities lease agreement to end June 30, 2021 at the Gresham Megget site with Charleston Advancement Academy Charter School.
Second.
Properly moving second. Reverend Collins, how do you vote?
Abstain.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Hollenshed?
abstain,
Ms. Jeffries?
Yes.
Ms. Darby?
Yes,
Ms. Coates, is she back on? I vote yes. That motion passes 5 yes with 2 extensions, and not voting is Ms. Coates and Mr. Garrett. All right, item 4B.
I move to approve the issuance of contracts, non-renewal letters, and letters notifying teachers of formal evaluation for the 2021 school year for all certified staff prior to May 1st, 2020.
Second.
And properly moving second. Reverend Collins, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Hollenshed?
yes,
Ms. Jeffries?
Yes.
Ms. Darby?
Yes,
And I vote yes. That motion passes 7 with 2 not voting. Item 4C, student transfer request.
Move to approve.
second,
Properly moving second. Reverend Collins, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Aye.
Ms. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Hollenshed?
yes,
Ms. Jeffries?
Yes.
Ms. Darby?
yes,
And I vote yes. That motion passes 7 with 2 not voting. Let's see, next item up on the agenda is just for information purposes, the public comments. Ms. Darby, you want to make that statement?
yes. So we're on item public comment. Due to the recommendations of medical and governmental officials after the outbreak of COVID-19, the board voted to suspend public comment policy on March 23rd in an attempt to flatten the curve and abide by the recommended social distancing guidelines. The board, however, wanted to make sure that the public has a mechanism by which they could be heard prior to voting on matters involving the district. So we created a method by which the public could submit comments in writing via our website. So those comments for this week were submitted via our website, and all of the board members received them this afternoon, and they will be made available after our meeting on the district website.
Okay, thank you. At this time now, we'll have the superintendent's report. Dr. Postlewaite.
Thank you, Reverend Mack. We have 2 updates tonight. The first one has to do with the COVID-19 report, and then we'll get to an update on the board priorities. So we'll start looking at the slides that help us summarize for you and the public the COVID-19 actions that this district has taken and the impact that that particular viral infection on our district as well as the rest of the country. Maggie, if you could go ahead and display the slides that board members received ahead of time so that the public could look at them while we're talking, that would be great. The first slide is simply the title slide. Okay, they're asking me to slow down for a minute so that they can change screens and get them displayed for everyone. The first slide is just the title slide, so we will slide on through it. It simply indicates that Carolyn Belcher and Jeff Barowie are going to be assisting with the presentation. The next slide is from a century ago. It's just a reminder to us that elsewhere on our continent in 1918, notice was given that there were a lot of closures that are very similar today. The following slide is a reminder that 100 years ago, the public was undergoing a very similar sort of quarantine situation that we find ourselves faced with, and trying to figure out the best ways to respond. The next slide is just another picture showing someone coming back to work. That's what we're contemplating now. Before we talk about that, though, we want to talk about just generally the impact that COVID-19 has had on our system. We know that schools are the cornerstone of a stable democracy. And Maggie, if we can advance to the next slide, thanks. Schools are the cornerstone of a stable democracy. The pandemic has brought a lot of challenges. The most important thing that it has done is to lay bare the disparities that have always existed. In the blue font there for board members' packets, that was a link to a research study that's put out by the same nonprofit that provides the MAP assessments for the district. Those assessments measure how much growth has occurred in a period of time. And the prediction is that most students will not achieve at the same levels they might have achieved at first. We will catch up that growth for most students, but students who are coming from homes where they can't connect to the internet, where connectivity isn't possible because broadband isn't yet available in that area, or families that can't afford broadband are missing out on the opportunity for one-to-one tutoring. Carolyn Belcher is going to talk in a little bit about what we intend to do about that just as quickly as we're able to see students face-to-face, even with some sort of physical distancing requirements in place. We want to give a shout out first to teachers, our school leaders, other staff who are out there doing everything they can possibly do to support every single student. Despite their best efforts, we know, as I just said, there isn't any substitute for face-to-face instruction. So we will give additional instructional time just as quickly as we possibly can. We will advance most students to the next grade. So unless a parent requests for a student to repeat a course, and if they do request that and the students at the high school level enrolled in a Carnegie course, a Carnegie unit course is under strict regulation by the State Department of Education. We will work with the State Department to make sure that no student who repeats a course that they withdraw passing from this semester will be harmed whatsoever. And it would be our intent to allow every student to withdraw passing, because there are some students who may be struggling with a mathematics course or a foreign language course or a number of other courses who would do well to take it over. And our high school students have plenty of opportunities to get all their required courses in using the kind of scheduling that we use in high school. So we'll give those opportunities just as broadly as we can. If a parent wants a child to repeat a grade, or if teachers had already talked to a parent about having a child repeat a grade before March 13th, there may be a few students whose best interest would be served by repeating a grade level. But otherwise, everyone will move forward. And one of the big challenges as students start back to school will be figuring out how to address the gaps that occurred while we were in this virtual learning situation or learning packet situation. Some of our schools have sent home learning packets to students who don't have the ability to connect virtually. We're working now on a reactivation plan for how we can start back up as soon as we can possibly do so. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in just a minute. Finally, I wanted to mention in this slide that while we will observe virtual graduations the first week in June, every high school principal is conferring now with faculty, and eventually they will involve students in making a decision about how to conduct an in-person ceremony, most likely in their own school community. So that decision rests with principals, and our principals are conferring with one another to try to make sure they are communicating well about what will be happening to celebrate and honor their senior class. We're most disappointed about the loss of the senior year, the rites of passage that seniors normally get to observe. All of our school marquees are honoring seniors this week, and we hope to be able to continue some special recognitions from now to the end of the school year. Next slide, please. Thanks. As we think about how to develop a plan, we simply follow our values. So using some references that were provided by medical experts in the area, we looked at some plans from other places in the country and began thinking about a reactivation plan with these 5 values. First, being always vigilant about every single thing we can learn about how this virus spreads and what schools can do now to support our students, families, and communities, and how we safely bring children back. We will make data-informed judgments. As we move to start back, we'll think about the differences that exist in our communities among individuals, among facilities, and among communities. We will think about how to care for the most vulnerable. There are some segments of our population that are more vulnerable than others, and we want to be very mindful of that as we think about how to start back. And then finally, we will have to have brand new protocols for safety. So moving forward, there will be some things, as many people have said, that will be changed forever. We simply will not be able to pick up where we left off on March 13th. My next slide, please. As we begin reactivation planning, we're looking at immediate needs between now and July, and then we're moving past July. And this list is not all inclusive, but it tells you some of the things we're thinking about. We're looking now at our facility and classroom capacities, given the current CDC guidelines of the 6-foot physical distancing. We're thinking about the instructional needs and the best approaches, how we support teachers in their efforts to support every single child. I've mentioned the new protocols for safety. There will need to be professional development for everyone regarding the new protocols. That's our faculty, staff, and for every student who comes back. There are a lot of scheduling and transportation considerations that have to be taken into the process of planning. And then we're almost sure that there's some sort of phased in startup sequence, and we may run dual opportunities for a while, because we imagine that there will be some families that, regardless of the precautions we take, will want their children enrolled virtually if we can make that happen. So we're looking at all possibilities. We will draft a plan, and we will include principals, teachers, and other staff in refining that plan to bring to the board for your consideration and for public input. And then finally, I'll mention that as we work on this and we take the advice of the state officials who are involved in this decision, we're also coordinating closely with the medical experts in our community who will have to address 3 areas before they feel it will be safe for us to restart in-person instruction. The first area is the specimen testing that we hear so much about. The second is the contact tracing, and then all of the analytics that go along with that, so that we can be informed very quickly about how someone's coming down with COVID-19 might impact them or their families. So I'm going to turn the slides over now to Carolyn Belcher, who's going to talk about the instructional approach from the learning services point of view. Carolyn?
Sure. First, I want to make sure I give an update on where we are right now. So we did distribute third quarter interim report cards via email, or if parents were not able to provide an email address, it was mailed to them. This is an interim because, as given guidance by the state, the final fourth quarter will be a combined grade with a third quarter. So instead of a third quarter grade and fourth quarter grade, it's going to be a semester grade to ensure that we give students maximum time to raise their grade if they can, but also not to punish any student who, for a variety of reasons, is not able to fully focus in the fourth quarter because of personal considerations or health issues or whatever in their family. We're focusing specifically on grade level content. We've gone through the standards for particularly the K-8 grades in ELA and math to see what would have been taught in the fourth quarter, which we are not teaching. Now, the good news is because reading and mathematics tends to spiral, so you revisit similar concepts at a higher level of complexity, higher level text, on reading comprehension, for example. There's not a large volume of new content, which gives us an opportunity to accelerate instruction in the summer and in the fall when we go back. Thus, we've been planning for an academic camp to begin in July to actually give an opportunity for those students who may not have had sufficient instruction this final quarter to get caught up and accelerate. Now, the challenge right now is as we look at the priorities, we're looking roughly at, say, a K-5 of 8,000 students, which is a significantly higher number than what we typically would serve in a summer camp. We have the format of the Read to Succeed third grade camp, which has been very successful in accelerating instruction. The challenge is we can't count on how often we can bring all the students together, given some of the limitations that Dr. Postlewaite just went over. So for that reason, we are planning for a more modest face-to-face effort for the highest need students, including students with IEPs and 504 plans, and thinking in terms of a longer online effort that would reach more students, just to make sure we have that flexibility that could begin as early as late June and continue right up until school begins. One of the big challenges to investing a lot of our instructional efforts to an online medium is tech access. Like the number of students who don't have access to high functioning Wi-Fi or may not have a device in their house. Now, the good news is that Charleston County has made an investment in devices so that we do have enough for every student in the district to have one-to-one. In the initial closure, some schools opted to distribute written packets rather than devices, in part because we weren't sure how long this was going to be. But as we realized how much longer it has been, those schools have gone back and redistributed devices. But we are estimating at this point around a 4,200 out of the 50,000 kids gap, either with access to Wi-Fi or actually a device, either because the student did not come in to pick it up later. Now, we're working very closely with community leaders to close that gap and make sure we have an accurate sense of this, because as we move into the next phase of this, it's going to be critical that we know which students are able to take advantage of the instruction we're offering and those who do not. All students should have access to learning packets. Our teachers are contacting them at least once a week. We're asking everyone twice a week to make sure that we can see students, we know they're okay face-to-face, and regularly holding online courses and giving feedback on work. I think one of the things that we realized is that there's some inconsistency and sometimes parents need help outside of the traditional school hours. So we started a family helpline, which launched just after spring break. 65 of our psychologists and counselors volunteered to take part in that. And it really has been an effective way of connecting families to both social support networks that they might need, mental health experts, as well as following up with the school for tutoring or homework help, if that's actually the challenge right now. I'm going to turn it over to Jeff.
Thanks, Carolyn. So very quickly, from the operational perspective, we've really hit our stride at this point and feel very comfortable with what we're doing on a regular basis. We've made a lot of adjustments, both from input from our parents, our families, as well as our own workforce. You can see some of the statistics here. We've served well over 300,000 meals since we began the program. Our number of sites expanded to 82 at this point, doing our best to reach the deepest parts of the district to minimize those that have to try to find their way back to another location to get the food out to where it's needed the most. And I did want to point out that we now have our cafeteria staff working what I call it partitioning, so that we don't have large groups working together. In the event that something negative would happen, we're working in small groups. So as far as a quarantine goes, we wouldn't have to pull aside an entire work staff, whether it be from the supply preparation and the handout of the meals. From an information technology perspective, the Wi-Fi program on our campuses and with our buses is working fine. We've expanded that Wi-Fi permanently to 15 campuses, and by expanding at 4 remote sites, and then we're hitting the rest with our 4-hour service buses, AM, PM, 20 sites a day. The repair route, we have a repair route every single day that hits 3 different school sites. We've replaced or repaired nearly 500 devices since that program began. And we did set up a parent help desk when we were shut down, and we've gotten well over 1,300 calls since we began that on the 22nd of as of the 22nd of April. From a capital programs perspective, one of the common questions we get are the schools going to open in August? We've had some delays, but we have done very well to keep those projects on track, and we have no problems with our permanent structures being ready to go by the school startup projected in August. And we are still working on our master plan that'll be presented to the board in an upcoming session. On the next slide, I did want to talk a little bit about Operation Kid Care. That's our partnership with Roper St. Francis Learning Services. The Learning Services staff, in particular Kaleidoscope, have done a phenomenal job. We've had senior leaders of the district step in to run shifts for the administration portion. It's been highly successful in providing support 12 hours a day, a little less than 12 hours a day for those frontline workers at Roper St. Francis. They have been extremely pleased with this opportunity, and it has given us some very good ideas, and also has presented how difficult it is to manage social distancing with kids. And so we're using it not only to support Roper St. Francis, but as a good way to prepare ourselves for what we might have to face later this summer into the fall.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yep.
Reverend Mack, that completes our report. We want to emphasize that we will have schools ready to open and bring children back as soon as it's safe to do that. Under whatever circumstances it's safe to do that, but we don't anticipate an immediate startup that will look anything like school sessions look like on March 13th. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any questions? Just one second. Mr. Hollenshed, I'm going to get to you in just 1 minute. I'm going to go down the list. Ms. Coates? Reverend Collins?
Yes.
Okay.
I have two questions, I think. Dr. Postlewaite, in the, I think it was the second page in the third bullet, he said most students will proceed to the next grade. If you could elaborate a little more on what you mean by the word most, in this case, most students.
As I explained going through it, I probably can't say a whole lot more than this. If a child's parents want them to repeat a course or a grade, that's always an option.
Right.
A teacher had already had a conversation prior to the closing on March 13th, then about the reasons for retaining a student, that would move ahead. It is not our intent to penalize any students. That means that when we start back, we're going to have to offer some extra days of instruction for the children who have not been in an environment or had the opportunity to have the support that they needed instructionally. That not all of us are equipped to teach all things to all children, and we realize that. So we're going to have a startup period to bring children back to recoup some of the learning loss. That's we'll deal with any question on a case basis. We simply don't want to harm a child either way, either by retaining them or moving them forward into content that they're not ready to undertake.
So let me ask it a different way. The kids that were maybe borderline, and since we had to close schools, they then dropped further behind, whereas they would be in jeopardy of automatic retention. Will those kids still proceed to the next grade, even though they're behind?
So there isn't, if you're talking about third graders, that's the
No,
only,
all kids.
third grade is the only grade I know where there's an automatic retention, other than some requirements to advance as a sophomore, junior, or senior at the high school level. We'll, on a case-by-case basis, Reverend Collins, we'll have to see how much we're able to catch students up with the additional instructional time that we offer just as soon as we're allowed to see students face to face and it's safe to do so.
So just one last question then. Okay, on the graduation, and I know some people are trying to do the virtual graduation, which you spoke about a little while ago. Is there a possibility that the school district can do something for the seniors in December or January if the virus has already passed away by then? Are we able to bring kids back and have some type of recognition for those kids that graduated early next year or late December, or the soonest possible date to give them some type of physical recognition that they're entitled, that they deserve, really?
Every senior will have an in-person graduation ceremony. The date for that will be determined by the school. So it might not be the same for every different community, but every community will be involved in making that decision. The principals leading that effort. So the graduation at one school may look different than the ceremonies at another school. At this point, we do not anticipate any large gathering inside buildings. So hopefully, while the weather is still warm, every school will be able to establish a graduation ceremony that we all agree seniors deserve. Yes, sir.
Okay, Ms. Coates. Ms. Coates. Okay, we'll come back to Ms. Coates. Mr. Frazier. Okay, Mr. Garrett.
I was
Ms.
muted.
Green.
Can I have another shot at the title?
Oh, sure, go ahead.
Thank you. I was commending everybody on the staff, top to bottom, for their hard work, because this has been completely uncharted territory, and to pivot, feed all these children, and provide them instruction is commendable. So I thank you all. I know that we've done, Mr. Kennedy and others have done a lot of analysis on the financial impacts of the sales tax declines and so on. What I haven't seen, and obviously I'm not in every meeting, but if we start talking about adjusted instruction, potential shifts where we're teaching half the school in the morning and half at night, now we're not just dealing with the revenue, now we're dealing with expenses at the same time. So I think we're going to have to think about other ways to solve that problem, because it's bad enough already. And I don't know if anybody's given any thought to the implications of the expense side of the ledger, but it's not an insignificant number, as I would imagine. So.
Yes, that question is keeping several people up at night. Mr. Kennedy and Carolyn Belcher are both working hard to try to figure out what sources of funding we could use, and along with Mr. Baroi's department on what the pupil-teacher ratios could possibly be, as well as a virtual option for those parents who aren't comfortable sending their children to school. So it is a whole systemic, complex problem that requires every aspect of the system to work together.
Well, I'll just give you an example. I'm aware of a large gathering spot that normally would seat 1,500 to 1,800 people, and if social distancing were imposed, they could seat 350. So when you start thinking about that implication across our district, that's a very significant disruption to the way we do business historically.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Green.
No.
Mr. Hollenshed.
Yes, sir. Ms. Belcher, your display that you just had, if you would, I would like for you to email that to me so I can look at it a little bit more further. I appreciate your presentation. I'm kind of concerned about the achievement gap and looking at your numbers and seeing how they particularly deal with the urban areas as far as, those areas that are particularly struggling as is. I appreciate your efforts in talking about that. I just want to expand that a little bit more by reading it instead of just getting the presentation, and I'll shoot you an email. And again, I want to thank staff. This is like Mr. Chris Fraser said, uncharted waters. And I'm concerned about the summer and how we're going to get into those areas that are struggling, but also have tutorial programs in place that kids can identify with people that are accustomed to them and to help them close that area. So I would close with that. And again, I appreciate what you just displayed. And I'd like to look at that a little bit more.
Okay, Ms. Jeffries. Ms. Darby.
I just want to say kudos to the staff.
Sorry, I was muted.
Go ahead, Priscilla.
First of all, I just want to thank staff because I think that running a school district on a regular time is hard enough, and this is so new and so hard. And also, I'm always paying attention to other districts around the country. And even though we might not be meeting every child's need every day here, we are doing so much better than so many districts, and I'm really proud of all of you, and thank you so much. And I know it's very hard, so thank you.
Okay, Ms. Darby.
Yeah, unprecedented or whatever Chris Fraser said is an understatement. So thanks everybody, and thanks for everybody for being so adaptable to all the change. And I think, Mr. Hollenshed, that presentation I was just looking is on board docs, because I'm sure we'll all, and you can download it. I think we'll all want to look at that closely. But thanks everybody.
Okay, Ms. Coates.
Thank you, Ms. Darby.
I don't think Ms. Coates is back on yet.
Yeah, she's on.
Oh,
Ms.
she on?
Coates. Yeah. Ms. Coates. All right, so let me echo all that have been said from various board members to district staff and the work that's being done. I know that this is something new that we have not been able to encounter before in the planning and in the preparation and making sure that we're still educating kids, even though we're in the crisis that we're in. So there's still a lot more work to be done in getting there, and we're definitely moving forward. So Dr. Postlewaite, Ms. Belcher, thank you so much for what you're doing. And again, let staff know that we do appreciate what they are doing in the preparation and trying to help us to move forward. But I do see that we will continue to have some more dialogue as we move forward as to how do we make sure that we're reaching all kids and making sure that those that are in the rural areas that does not have Wi-Fi, how do we reach those kids and making sure that, no stone is left unturned and reaching every student, 50 of our kids in CCSD. So thank you again for that report. And Ms. Coates, are you back on? All right, she texted me and said she wanted to.
She's putting her headphones in. Oh.
All right, so we'll come back to Ms. Coates. We'll move right along. Item 7A.
Thank you. If we could do the other board on the board priorities. Maggie, if you could load those slides now.
I'm sorry, you had another presentation?
We did, Reverend Mack. We wanted to let
apologies.
the board know, it's okay. We just wanted to let the board know we have not forgotten about the what started out as mission critical.
Got it.
The community groups, and then the administration made some recommendations to the board. The board then took those recommendations and developed your own priorities. And today, Carolyn Belcher and the Learning Services staff would like to run through some quick updates on 5 of the different areas. While Maggie's loading the slides, I'll just indicate, Carolyn, I might need your help, but I believe it's the early childhood program, particularly as it's unfolding at the pilot site at Mary Ford, Buste, Neminger, the District 10 middle school merger, and then finally what's being done to support those schools where children have the largest learning gaps, the schools that the state has alerted, or schools that are receiving children from their feeder pattern schools that are below grade level. So Carolyn, I'm going to turn it over to you and your staff.
Thank you. You had that correct, Dr. Postlewaite. And Maggie, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, I'll just give a brief update and then turn it over to key leaders at each of these projects. As you know, the board had a much longer list of board priorities, but we're focusing in on some of the key priorities that have updates that we think are substantial at this point in the year. The board began this long before I started, so you know that all credit goes to the people you're about to hear from and the teams of leaders that have been working with them. I think it's been challenging to keep the focus on these board priorities while we're also trying to figure out how to provide instruction in a different way. But I have to say, I feel very lucky to be working with the people who are about to speak. So first I'll turn it over to Kim Foxworth to talk through early childhood at the Mary Ford Center.
Thanks, Carolyn. Good afternoon. The Early Childhood Task Force continues to work hard on the project goals that were established in the beginning of the task force and beginning of the year, including a comprehensive examination of 4K curriculum, the transition of Mary Ford into an early childhood center, and looking at possibly expanding to universal 4K. Mary Ford, I'm very excited, is making progress. This is going to be the place where we're really going to be able to try out and examine things that we're studying this year. So we're going to provide the opportunity to think, plan, and prepare for long-term early childhood in CCSD at Mary Ford. We're going to be able to try out the strategies and things that we've studied and examined, and eventually we'll roll out program-wide. We continue to connect with the community, our community partners and stakeholders, to maintain engagement in Mary Ford as the project continues to be a priority and move forward. In collaboration with the administrative team at Mary Ford, we are identifying and hiring certified teachers for our 3K Head Start classrooms at Mary Ford, which was one of the project goals. So that's very exciting. We are preparing for the rollout of professional development on the curriculum components for Mary Ford's teachers and possibly the acceleration schools over the next couple months. The project team continues to fine-tune the opportunities to bring the 2 school communities, Shakora and Mary Ford, together when it can be done safely. The original plans involved in partnering with engaging creative minds, and we're still doing some planning. During the school closure, we are excited and we've continued to provide research-based professional learning. Once again, aligned to work with the project teams, we've done some phonemic awareness instruction and professional learning during the school closure on phonemic awareness. We've had over 250 early childhood educators in our district participate. The early learning team continues to recruit for all of our programs for CD, Head Start, and Early Head Start. We're still accepting applications. Overall, the project is moving along and we continue to make sure that we improve first grade readiness outcomes in CCSD. And so Maggie, I'm done. I'm gonna turn it over to Michelle.
Good afternoon, board members and Dr. Postlewaite. I will be speaking to the Buste entrance and school configuration effort. We have initiated the work of revising the entrance criteria as well as the restructuring of Buste Academy for the purpose of ensuring greater access to more students across our diverse district while maintaining the high standards and expectations of the program. As you know, we have rolled out the school choice decision notifications. Families will have until May 8th to confirm acceptance of those seats. Our Human Resources Division, the school principal at Buste Academy, are currently hiring for a few vacant positions. We are also in the draft stage of establishing the new third grade entrance criteria that will be effective in the 2023-2024 school year. As reported, the awareness and outreach efforts to families across the system have been particularly successful at generating widespread interest in Butte Academy. Of the 112 seats offered, 96% of the students are zoned for high poverty areas. All students offered seats are performing at or above the national 75th percentile on MAP in both reading and math. The demographic summary of the offered expansion seats is 51% minority students, which is more than double the current minority percentage of the student population at Butte Academy. Moving forward, the priority will be on welcoming, supporting, and assisting new students and families with a successful transition to Butte Academy. Also, we are committed to reviewing the entrance criteria and data annually to ensure that we are getting the results aligned with the board goals and priorities. Thank you. Next is Buffy Roberts with Meminger.
Good afternoon. Today I'll be sharing some information about Meminger's K-5 advanced academic component. The purpose of this initiative is to design and implement an advanced academic component at Meminger Elementary, an IB countywide magnet. The goal here is to provide high quality teaching and learning within a curriculum that reflects both acceleration and enrichment, two key components of quality gifted education. Current priorities include focusing on informing parents of the offered seats through the school choice process so that families will have time to accept these seats by the May 8th deadline. We're also continuing to work with the incoming principal and school staff to vet and mold the model for this advanced academic component. We are prioritizing leveraging this advanced model in such a way that expectations for all learners in all grades increase through the use of data, scheduling, professional development, fidelity implementation of curriculum, and best practices in instructional delivery. And we'll continue to devise ways to welcome and support the current and new students, families, and staff at Meminger. We do have cause to celebrate as we were able to complete the screening process for our out of attendance zone students prior to the extended school closure, so that 60 of these students could be offered seats on April 17th to attend Meminger Kindergarten. The hiring process to fill vacancies at the school is also making progress. The incoming principal has been hired and work is currently underway on data review for the continued development of the model that is to be implemented in the upcoming school year. I'll turn it over to Dr. Williams.
All righty, good evening, Board Chair Mack, Vice Chair Darby, other members of the Board of Trustees, Dr. Postaway, and others. I am here this evening to share updates as it relates to the D10 middle school merger. I would like to reiterate that the purpose of this board priority was to provide equitable access and opportunity for all middle school scholars in D10 starting the 2020-2021 school year. More specifically, high quality programming in all areas of core academic classes and related arts for all. The current priorities surrounding D10 are finalizing the decision about the best merger model for the 2020-2021 school year, given where we are currently and possible future impacts surrounding COVID-19. Future priorities are centered around 1, continuing the work with the committee that was formed right before the extended school closure to bring forth recommendations for the board to consider as it relates to the future middle school learning platform in D10, and 2, continued community building among the school families in West Ashley, as this has been and will continue to be a priority as it relates to the merger. There is cause to celebrate, and the school leaders were very appreciative that they were given an opportunity to investigate for the 2020-2021 school year the best merger conditions for scholars they will be serving, and which may seem minimal, but it's very exciting to me, the scholars have identified a new mascot, the Wolverine, and I can't wait to see how this will be represented in print because I am such a huge X-Men fan, so I hope you all as well. So we have steadily and will continue to work on the instructional programming for the merged school model. Our focus is that there are many pieces of the merger plans that could be easily converted to serve whatever model the team feels is best for our scholars next year. Thank you.
And then lastly, just to give an update on the acceleration schools, which will be probably a board workshop that we're working to schedule in the month of May. Because as we had talked about the last board meeting, there are three big priorities that we are leveraging to really make a difference in acceleration schools, making sure that we have the right talent in the building, that the academics that we're offering in terms specifically of curriculum and the quality of instruction is rigorous, and that we're closing and accelerating learning for all kids in those schools. And then the last priority is to make sure that the larger community has a voice in the school, and what's the long-term solution to make sure that any shifts and improvements in these school buildings is sustainable for decades to come. So the big idea right now is that we're in the midst of hiring season. So the priority is to make sure the acceleration schools have access to the strongest talent. Research is very clear that the earlier you hire, the more talented the teachers are that are in the pool right now. So we have assigned, with the help and support of HR and Mr. Brigman, an HR specialist to work specifically with those schools to match up talent for their vacancies. We're tracking their vacancies on a week-by-week level to make sure for high-need subjects areas they're moving quickly to hire. And right now, I'm also in the process of interviewing and considering candidates for the executive director of the acceleration schools, who would manage at least the 10 elementary schools in the new year in order to really focus on making sure these schools have the support that they need. As we shared in our last board update, we did have our first meeting with the University of Virginia, where we stepped back in their larger framework for turnaround. It's a good foundation for some of the work that we're doing, and we plan to participate in what might be a virtual boot camp this summer, which will allow some of our acceleration principals an opportunity to interact with other schools across the country and learn from them and their progress. Finally, at this point, I do have a proposal around a 3-year strategy for change. And when we do the board workshop, my plan is to go in depth, because I think one of the things we're going to need to be thinking about are what are the right investments over the next 3 years to ensure that we're making those shifts, both on the academic side of the shop, but also in the talent side. None of our improvements are going to work if we don't have the right principals and school leaders. So we're hoping, Mr. Brigman and I, to really take some investments in talent and HR to make sure that we have the talent that we need long term. I hope you've seen that little poster up and about, because we're trying to make sure that we distinguish the acceleration schools from the rest of the schools in Charleston County and have messages that appeal to folks who are inspired by equity and making a difference for the kids that need them the most.
That concludes our update on the board priorities, Reverend Mack. Thank you.
Okay, are there any further questions from any of the board members? Ms. Coates, I think you're about the only one.
Reverend Matt, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Yes.
So I have a couple of questions related to each of the presentations. I'll just go through them by the slides. At the Mary Ford Early Childhood Center, the prior board update said that the parent advocate funding was in question. I'd like to ask, can we make sure, I was under the impression the parent advocate funding was part of the budget, regardless of your funding source. I expected that to be part of the budget. So do we have the plan to have that parent advocate at Mary Ford ASAP?
We do. It was not in the initial allocation, ma'am. So we're working with Mr. Kennedy's department to make sure that it is there. We have someone identified for that role. So we should be well positioned to ensure that that's in place for the fall. I mean, as soon as possible, the new fiscal year.
Thank you. As it relates to Buist, I just wanted to make a reminder when you said we have to very carefully follow the annual reports and annual academics. I believe we also included in the board's initiatives that material is included in a board update as well. The board wants to be very, very much aware of those academics. If I'm wrong, someone can go back and review that and let me know. As it goes to Meminger K-5, how many applicants did we have for that program?
Ms. Coates, we had over 60 applicants. We had 60 that were accepted. I would have to rely on school choice for the exact number of students, but we can get you that information.
Okay, I do have some folks asking, so I think we need to publish how many were interested in that program. Maybe even as far as district-wide, because I think the other thing is how many kids out of D20 were offered seats, not just out of the Memminger attendance zone. Do we have that information of how many kids beyond D20 are in the Memminger program for next year?
We can pull that specifically. We typically look at the students who actually accept seats in those areas, but we can pull that information.
Okay, I think it's important. And I realize no one has to continue to say we are in uncharted, unprecedented times that nobody could have anticipated. We're there. The challenge that we have is that it doesn't matter. The kids who were 6 years old this year are going to be 7 years old next year, quarantine or not. So I still have to bring to the forefront some concerns about closing IB access to all the other children in the Charleston County School District. So we've done that with the Butte kind of narrowing down their attendance. And is there any concern about lack of IB access to the other, roughly 900 square miles of CCSD?
I don't know how that, I'm not sure I understand what you're referring to, Mrs. Coates. We added grade levels. We added one section per grade level in grades 3, 4, 5, and 6. And as we move forward and begin to open up that third grade that Ms. Roberts talked about in 2023, that access, I mean, those are data points the board has agreed to watch every year to make sure that Butte isn't turning into a school that serves only District 20 students. But for this coming year, about 1/3 of the students will be from schools with high poverty. The other 2/3 of the student body remains the same as it was this year because we're increasing the student body. So we'll have to watch from year to year to see whether there's an impact on the numbers of students who are accepted from each attendance area on a pro rata basis.
Okay, thank you. So do we have any information or I think my question would be going to, and it's the same as the partial magnets. We need to look at the siblings who lost access to partial magnet schools because they became constituent magnets. Did that happen, or did we prioritize current siblings into constituent magnet schools this year, even if they didn't live in the constituent zone? Specifically, if there was a child attending Lang last year under the partial magnet programs, that child's sibling would have had a priority access into Lang Magnet School. Did we honor that this year when we turned Lang into a constituent magnet school, or did we not allow siblings that priority if they did not live in the constituent zone?
We will get the specific answer for you. I can tell you we followed the board policy, and as far as I know, there's plenty of room at Lang. There was not a problem with those who requested to go there, as far as I know. But if you know otherwise about a specific situation, let us know, and we'll look back at the specifics and respond to your question in the board update, if that's okay.
Yes, and I don't have any specifics, but one of the, we're talking about board initiatives, and there were a couple of initiatives not covered in this presentation, one of which was transitioning partial magnet schools to constituent magnets.
Right.
So I'm looking for that broad answer. We had X number of children in these schools that did not live in the constituent zone. At some point, those kids are going to need to be allowed access to that type of magnet education in their own area. I'm looking at that broad picture. Starting in 2020, did children that would have access those schools lose that access, and to what numbers? And I'm looking for big things. Like if we had 25 kids in a magnet school that lived outside the constituent district, did any of their siblings get into that school, or did we not have those kids, and where are those siblings? And the nice thing is we didn't talk about the Academic Magnet High School initiatives, and I want to get some information on how that's going, the top two and the other initiatives that we started this year. I'd like to see some updates on that. And that's all I have, Reverend Mack.
All right, thank you. Dr. Postlewaite, is there anything else you want to share or add?
I just wanted to thank you, Reverend Mack. I just wanted to say we brought updates on 5 areas tonight, knowing I think there were 19 priority areas. So we will try to update you on 3 to 5 each of the regular board meetings. And in the meantime, we'll respond to the specific answers that we weren't prepared to answer with the data in front of us.
And I would just say that just doing it from a 3 to 5 each board meeting, I want to get that information sooner rather than later, because it all affects how we should be thinking as we go into the 2020 school year. And what do we have? May, June, and July's board meeting. So I just want to make sure that we're really on top of that, because we're invested in these things making a difference day 1 of August 2020.
Yes, okay. All right, thank you, Dr. Postlewaite, and your staff for the update and report that was given to us tonight. As we continue to move forward, we will get through these issues. Item 7A on the agenda. Item 7A on the agenda, is there a motion?
Reverend Mack.
Yes, go ahead, Reverend Collins, you have a motion?
I was willing to ask a couple of questions of the presentation.
Okay, we're already
kind of quick though.
No, Reverend Collins, you can email those to Dr. Postlewaite.
Well, everybody didn't have a chance.
Only Cindy had a chance.
Oh, no, I went down the list. Okay, well, let's back up.
You got as far as Cindy, sorry.
Reverend Mack, you did not go down the list. I'm sorry.
You didn't.
Yes, you did.
On the first part you did. On the other presentation you did.
All right, back up, guys. Hold just a minute. Then let's go down the list again, because again, let's be clear. I went down the list initially. All right, so we'll go down the list again if there's further questions. All right, Ms. Darby?
No.
Mr. Frazier?
I'm good.
Mr. Garrett? Mr. Hollenshed?
Yeah, one question from the last presentation.
Okay.
The numbers that you displayed on Butte Academy, when you said there was 120, 96% applicants, and I guess the word you used I forgot the word you used for that, but anyway, I'm curious to find out. We did so much display about not having Butte have enough African American students. I wonder what the percentage of those non-students are, and are they from the area, and what origin are they from?
Mr. Hollenshed, there were 100.
I know you can answer that today, but go ahead if you want to.
Well, you did answer it.
So there were 112, and 50%, 50.9 were minority, and that includes African American, Hispanic, Asian, all non-white students. And so I don't have the breakdown in front of me of how many Black students, white students, Hispanic students, but the majority were in the minority segment.
Okay, but remember when we raised all that sand, the buzzword was African American students did not have access into that school. I'm just curious about that. I want to debate that today, but I'm just curious about that. So I appreciate that later on.
Very well.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Green?
I'm good, thank you.
Reverend Collins?
Yes, sir. Back to the abuse and Meminger. The 60 seats that were offered to out of attendance zone students, what created the need for that?
Wouldn't that be the board's vote?
Ms. Simmons, you want to respond?
I'm not sure I understand the question, Reverend Collins.
All
You're
right.
asking how do we land on 60?
What I'm asking is the students that live in District 20 already. I don't know how many of them applied. Was that the 120 that applied to live in District 20 already? And then you had 60 office seats that live out of the attendance zone. So what I'm asking is, why are some why are the 60 offered seats out of the attendance zone? Or did we have a lot of vacant seats at Buse that created this opening, or where's that stemming from is what I'm asking.
May I, Reverend Collins, I think that you're referring to Meminger
Yeah,
Elementary.
Meminger, yes.
The students who are already zoned for Meminger did not have to apply. They would automatically be accepted into the Meminger school. It was just students who wanted to apply who were out of attendance zone.
So you had the space available is what I'm asking.
Yes, sir. We expanded the kindergarten classes at Meminger.
All right. On the you mentioned the abuse racial makeup was 82% white. So, and you mentioned the 51% minorities applied. Kevin has mentioned. What is the goal to diverse Buse? What is the diversity goal we aiming for? Then I have one more question. I'll just that'll be done.
Reverend Collins, we didn't aspire to a particular percentage or number, but generally speaking, we want the campus, the building to mirror the overall demographics of Charleston County. And so we knew we had a ways to go, but we feel like the effort with these expansion classes gets us closer to a more diverse school holistically. So we didn't say we want a 50-50 split necessarily, but we knew we had to make some inways in terms of getting the school to be more diverse than it currently stands.
And this will work. This will work.
So what we know today, based on the seats offered, is that we are making good headway. So we will know on May 8th how many families actually accept the seats, and then we can give you a more updated figure.
This credit from Ms. Belcher. Thank you. You asked about you said about the director of acceleration schools, a new director for, I think it was you.
Yeah.
I have a question, but I guess it's more of a concern. If we're going to hire a new director to run 10 schools, I can assume, based on my experience, that ought to be at least $125,000 or so in salary. And I'm wondering if we, instead of spending that money on a new director, if we can't put that money in the classrooms by hiring additional assistant teachers, where the help is needed the most at. I don't know how effective a person can be from the outside as a director, or you already have a principal, in some cases even assistant principals, and then parent advocates. But can we consider putting that money into the classrooms to have a direct impact?
We are beyond the executive director of Acceleration Schools going to invest in classroom instruction. It varies depending on school and what those investments are. So for example, at Sanders Cloud, we're adding in arts positions in keeping with the arts component. There's also a team teaching component that's existed at Shakora, which we're continuing to invest in, which is beyond the standard per pupil and the state subsidies. The plan right now, which again, we're looking forward to doing a more extensive workshop so we can really dive into this, is I am going to ask the board and hopefully have some of it covered through Title II monies, which are professional development monies, for a significant investment in building teacher capacity around the new curriculum that we have rolling out across the district. So as you know, we've already started with the phonics work across the district. We're going to Bridges mathematics for the elementary and illustrative math for middle school across the system. For these schools specifically, we want to make sure that teachers in those buildings have an opportunity to see what it's like to have kids take more of the intellectual lift, to really give them extra support given the unique challenges there. So that'll be an additional investment as well. And our plan is to pilot some ELA. So this one position is the one head count that I'm adding at the central office. And frankly, I'm going to cost shift from other places, so it shouldn't be an overall increase. But we are planning on making more classroom level investments because I agree with you, sir. The only way we're going to actually get to significant change is if we change things to the classroom level.
Thank you.
Okay, let me just, I'm sorry. Yeah, so let me just, first, let me apologize to board members. I don't want anyone to think that they were being overlooked and asking questions. So we did do I did do an early roll call in the presentation slide, not realizing that the superintendent still had additional presentations to make and failed to do a roll call thereafter. So my apologies to that. I want to make sure board members do get an opportunity to ask any and all questions to the superintendent and staff during their reporting. So I will ask again, is there any further questions for any of the presentation that was made by the superintendent and staff? Okay, hearing then, thank you so much, Dr. Postaway and your staff for your presentation. Now we will go to item 7A.
I move to approve second reading, deleting the 6th paragraph of policy GCO.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Properly moving second. Ms. Coates, how do you vote?
Yes.
Reverend Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Mr. Garrett? Ms. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Hollenshed?
Yes.
Ms. Jeffries?
Yes.
Ms. Darby?
Yes.
And I vote yes. That motion carries. Item 7B.
Motion to approve second reading of deleting policy GCCB.
Second.
Properly moving second. Are there any questions? Hearing none. Ms. Coates, how do you vote?
Yes.
Reverend Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Aye.
Mr. Garrett? Ms. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Hollenshed?
Yes.
Ms. Jeffries?
Yes.
And I vote yes. That motion carries. Item 8A, is there a motion?
Move to approve. I can
Is there a
read the whole
second?
thing if you want me to.
Second.
All right, moved by Ms. Darby, second by Ms. Coates. Ms. Darby, could you just read it just for
Yep.
clarity, make sure?
Yep. I move to approve the Head Start, Early Head Start budget amendment application to include $196,711 for COLA and $284,666 quality improvement funds.
Okay, I believe Ms. Jeffries second that. Ms. Jeffries, is your second still there? Okay, stand. All right, Ms. Coates, how do you vote?
Question.
Okay, Reverend Collins, you have a question?
Yes. I wanted to inquire a little more about what is the quality improvement. What is that in particular?
Sure. The Office of Head Start allocated all the grantees some funding to improve some areas of deficit. And so we had last year, 2019, we had an audit and we were low in one of our instructional areas. And so we're using the funding that the Office of Head Start is allocating to get some teacher level coaches and some other professional development targeted on that instructional area that we were low on.
So you're saying you were low in money to pay salaries?
No, we were scored low in an area through an observation. So it is to focus on instruction, is to hire some teacher level coaches to focus on the area we scored low in the class.
So the $284,000 will all go to hiring teachers?
It's teacher level coaches, professional development. It is materials to enhance for Head Start and Early Head Start.
And one last thing, when you submit the application, this goes to the federal government or the state government? Where does it go?
The federal government, the Office of Head Start.
Okay, thank you.
And
Reverend Collins.
I didn't say in the motion, but it's up on the screen that staff is recommending we approve this action to be implemented contingent upon teachers receiving a COLA or cost of living allowance increase.
Yeah, I saw that. Thank you.
Reverend Mack, I have a question.
Yes, Ms. Coates.
Dr. Postaway, we had discussed at various times transitioning out of the Head Start grant and possibly taking this early education into CCSD so we could more control the curriculum and the certification needs. Is that still a conversation? And when does this grant end for CCSD? When do we have to reapply or decide not to apply?
We have one more year left on the Early Head Start grant, and that too will be part of a workshop or informal conversation coming up with the board in the next month that Carolyn referenced in her comments.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any further questions from any of the board members? Hearing none, Ms. Coates, how do you vote?
Yes.
Reverend Collins,
Yes.
Mr. Frazier,
Yes.
Mr. Garrett, Ms. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Hollenshed,
Yes.
Ms. Jeffries,
Yes.
Ms. Darby,
yes.
and I vote yes, and that motion carries. Next item up on the list is item 8B.
I make a motion that we approve the early Head Start budget amendment application to include $283,113 for transition to kindergarten summer program.
Second.
We're properly moving second. Are there any questions? Hearing none. Ms. Coates, how do you vote?
Yes.
Reverend Collins,
Yes.
Mr. Frazier,
Yep.
Mr. Garrett, Ms. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Hollenshed,
Yes.
Ms. Jeffries,
Yes.
Ms. Darby,
Yes.
and I vote yes, that motion carries. Item 8C. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the early Head Start budget amendment application to allow lap salaries to be used to refurbish and update the furniture for CFDC, in parentheses, Mary Ford, Midland Park, and West Ashley Head Start grant period June 1, 2019 to May 31st, 2020.
Okay, is there a second? We're properly moving second. Are there any questions?
Yes.
Reverend Collins?
So, you said the lap salaries to buy furniture and other stuff. Don't we have the capital budget to buy all the furniture and stuff we want in capital?
Oh, I will just speak quickly. We do have a capital budget, but we can never, the capital budget is not adequate to address all of the district's needs. So this would allow us to use the funds that are left over from, if we had a vacancy for a month, or we hired someone who made less than the projected salary, it just picks up those funds and lets us add to what could otherwise be done in the capital building program.
Right. So you know what I'm thinking, that if you got lap salaries, I want to see them in the classroom.
Kim, do you want to address?
Sure. We have, like Dr. Postlewaite said, we're using this because, number one, this goes along with our Mary Ford project. So not only do we want to, we're doing through capital funds, putting some money into Mary Ford. You know, the current CFDC is on that same campus. It's going to come together with the new Early Learning Center. And so this is so the whole campus is going to get an upgrade. We are continuing to hire, so we will not be in this situation next year. We are starting now with our hiring and trying to get fully staffed, so we will not have lap salaries for next year.
Okay. All right.
All right, no further questions. On item 8C, Ms. Coates, how do you vote?
Yes.
Reverend Collins,
Yes.
Mr. Frazier,
Yes.
Mr. Garrett, Ms. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Hollenshed, Ms. Jeffries,
Yes.
Mr. Hollenshed, are you there?
Yes, so yes.
Okay. Ms. Darby?
Yes.
And I vote yes, that motion carries. Item 8D on the capital program.
Move to reallocate the funds as recommended.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Are there any questions? Hearing none, Ms. Coates, how do you vote?
Yes.
Reverend Collins,
Yes.
Mr. Frazier,
Yes.
Mr. Garrett, Ms. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Hollenshed,
Yes, I'll be back in a minute too.
Ms. Jeffries,
Yes.
and Ms. Darby,
Yes.
and I vote yes, that motion carries. Item 8E.
Move to approve the Audit and Finance Committee charter.
Second.
Properly moving second. Are there any questions? Hearing none, Ms. Coates, how do you vote?
Yes.
Reverend Collins,
Yes.
Mr. Frazier,
Yes.
Ms. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Hollenshed,
He left.
Ms. Jeffries,
Yes.
Ms. Darby,
Yes.
and I vote yes, that motion carries. Item 8F is for information. Are there any questions in reference to that?
I think that Mr. Kennedy wanted to provide some summary information to the board, Reverend Mack.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is Don Kennedy. The Clifton Larson Allen external audit firm concluded their audit of the procurement processes for fiscal year 19. Audit results were briefed to the Audit and Finance Committee earlier this week. In the report, there were 5 findings. Majority of the findings were compliance in nature. For instance, we have a surplus disposition of our surplus property. Typically in an organization like this, that is handled through the procurement department. Here in CCSD is handled in the facilities department, and we needed to designate that actually delegate that authority over to the facilities department. We did that delegation letter back in July of last year, July of 2019. The audit period ended June 30. And so technically we were not in compliance as of the date of the audit, that period that the audit covered. We are not in compliance. Another compliance area was on SWMBE plan for the upcoming fiscal year. Again, we submitted that plan last year in the summer. It should have been submitted in the spring of last year, and hence that's a non-compliance. We submitted the plan for next fiscal year 21, earlier this month, so we have complied for this year. The third area of compliance was under the IDC contracts, indefinite delivery type contracts. We exceeded the threshold of $300,000 over 2 years on one of the contracts by $15,000 and another one by $4,000. And so we have put in place a review process of those types of contracts on an ongoing basis to make sure that we maintain those thresholds. And then the last item was relate to our P card, the purchase cards, our procurement card processes. There are some instances that the auditors did an inventory or did a sample of 25 transactions. They found some problems with 3. None of the problems indicated any problems with the actual purchases themselves. Again, they were more compliance related, timeliness of reviewing the P card statements, timeliness of approval of P card transactions. And so with the updated charter that the board just approved, within that charter update, we've put in a section that we will brief the Audit and Finance Committee throughout the year in specific months of the year on our business metrics. Captured within those business metrics, we are taking a look at processes associated with procurement card purchases. So that concludes the update.
Okay, is there any further question for Mr. Kennedy? All right, hearing none. Item 8G, I'm sorry. It's the capital project report for information that has been provided to us. Are there any questions in reference to that? Okay, also item 8H is for information as well. Has been provided to us. Are there any questions in reference to the financial report? Okay, consent item has been approved at the beginning of the meeting.
Move to adjourn.
So, ask for a motion for an adjournment.
Second.
Been so moved. And second, board members, thank you so much for your time. This now concludes our board meeting for today. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Hey.
All right.